All right. Hello. Welcome to another episode of our new podcast series. Today I'm joined with Geoffrey Mark, who I've been working with for a number of years. I think we go back probably at least 5 years or so.
Yep.
It's my former startup, 3XR. And Jeff was at Crate and Barrel managing all their fun innovation around digital photography. So let me hand it over to you, Jeff, to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here and talk about all things CGI. Um, yeah, my history is I was the former director of Crate and Barrel and um, director of CGI strategy and operations, and really founded that department and capability out of just an interesting set of needs for photo replacement, and it just blossomed. So for the past 7 years, I had been really working on that department and that discipline. Now I'm kind of moved on. I'm actually working for a company, 3D Cloud, which is doing all kinds of 3D visualizations for many customers. So hopefully leveraging my experience inside the furniture business to that.
Excellent. Yeah, I feel like we have kind of a similar background there in that I was at Wayfair in the early days, like leading some innovation and finding that, this transformation from traditional photography workflow where you need to have a location, you need a studio, you need to assemble
Yeah.
all your products, put it together, get all the lighting just right, take those photos, and then send them off to post production. And that world is fairly limited because you have a limited set of products, you got a budget, you need time and space to do it all, and then you're kind of locked into those results. I think in parallel we both kind of found that through new technology, particularly CGI, the realism has gotten to a point where customers can't really tell the difference. And I remember back at Wayfair, maybe almost 10 years ago at this point, we had a board on the wall. And so when people would come by our part of the company as they were checking out the tour, we'd have that game of, can you guess which one's
Yeah.
a real photo versus a CGI image? And, unless they were, trained 3D artists, they couldn't usually tell the difference. And that was important to the customer for us. Like, if we could produce imagery, we could do 10 times as much imagery with that workflow versus the photo studio workflow, then that many more products are going to get, a nice lifestyle, inspirational treatment and therefore sell more. Did you guys find a similar, process or experience on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that test before too and loaded the deck where I put all CGI. And so there were photos, so they always would guess wrong, but no,
Yeah.
I think you know, thinking back, and one trend is obviously, furniture retailers who have their own studio space. Um, there's always going to be a need for more space. There's always going to be a need to avoid storing physical products and moving them through that studio. And so the whole idea of reusable sets that you don't have to break down, and in virtual sets, CGI sets that you don't have to
Yeah.
break down, props that you don't have to store, so that was really a key. But I think that one of the biggest things with realism was, we were, at the time that we started CGI, the first project that we ever did was creating, you know multiple fabrics on frames for the e-commerce website. And it was a straight on silhouette, what we call, white background, straight on. And we were, honestly, at that time, we were like, we had these thumbnails that said, not photo not available, check your store for details.
Oh no.
And
So you'd
so
have a color
we,
option people could buy online, but they couldn't see it.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So immediately that started the search, and we had to have photographic quality. It had to hang, those images in CGI had to hang with all the other images that were shot. And so that really was the beginning of our arc of learning how to do CGI. Um, so yeah, so I think ultimately learned a lot of lessons. I think the holy grail for folks like Crate and Barrel and other people in the market was, catalog. The level of lifestyle photography that you could do in a catalog, not having to go on location, not having to ship a stick of furniture, and saying, hey, we can do this. We can do any place in the world you want. We can go there and create that environment. So that's the holy grail. But then you've got that, and you've got also e-commerce, which is very documentary style shooting. You want to honor the
Yeah.
product. You're not necessarily telling a story, and that has to be done at scale. So and on the one hand, you got artisanship in CGI, and the other hand, you've got automation and scale, and that's where the bulk of my work was at Crate and Barrel.
Excellent. Yeah. I think, as other folks who are watching this or maybe in the similar space or similar situation, if they haven't gotten started yet, maybe they're still in that traditional process.
Mm.
Like, what do you generally advise is the best place to get started for someone new to this space?
Yeah. I think the first is realizing that there are kind of two streams of work that I see. And one is photo replacement, which is there's kind of a cost savings, but it's more like taking opportunities to do things that maybe you couldn't do because of your limitations as an organization. The other thing is making money and using visualization to make money. And that's where you're starting to get to the AR, the configurators and things like that. So for a company getting started, I always say focus on to use CGI for things that you can't do now, and that whether it's capabilities or whether it's a it's a level of output and scale that you can't handle. So for example, custom upholstery, that's a no-brainer. There's no way you're going to take that many millions of combinations of photos. So that's a no-brainer for CGI. And that's going to
Mhm.
make money, right? Obviously, if you have a custom program, a custom upholstery program, you're going to want to support it with images. Images are commerce, and that's the take that I've gotten. Um, so again, yeah, doing things that you can't do now, figuring out how to
Mhm.
automate. And the other thing I say is use people and resources for the things they're good at. So there was never a one source place. It's getting closer. Companies like 3D Cloud have a lot of capabilities, and even Super DNA has a lot of different capabilities. But even when you look at artists, like we would find that okay, some artists are really good at geometry and making models, digital
Mhm.
doubles and
Yeah.
product furniture, and some folks are really good at textures and knowing how to light and create renderings. And so
Yeah, it's
finding
almost two
it
different skill
little,
sets. Yeah,
yeah,
we
it
we
is,
do
and
internally split our workflow. It is specifically that way. So we have modeling teams that do the geometry and then texturing
yeah.
teams that do the materials and the lighting.
Yeah. So the advice I get, other than that advice, the two other points is it's also like just being sure that you get educated on who's good at what. You got to try things, you got to give tests, you got to give pilots, and you got to find out who's good at what. And then you're just like really constantly looking at your resource pool to find out, okay, who's good at what and how can I dial up and have people focus and knowing that sometimes studios and resources will get better over time, but that initial take is super important to assess. Um, yeah, I think the other thing is just like working with and making sure that one thing that we didn't do so great, but I would advise is really starting out with a DAM and making sure that you have a repository that is performant, secure, cloud based, that you will not have to pay the tax of resources of finding assets, trafficking assets, keeping track of assets. That's a big thing that I
Yeah,
wish that
once
we
you
had
scale up
more.
for sure, and
Yeah.
if you're not already doing that for your 2D content, and you're still sharing, Google Drive links and
Yes.
Dropboxes, like to get this content moved around. Once you go into that kind of having a world of being able to search content, tag content, share content,
Yeah.
export it in different formats, it's really hard to go back.
Yeah. You think about a retailer like Crate and Barrel or any furniture retailer creating products, physical products is a whole process of like gathering data and sourcing and talking and exchanging information about how that product is designed and then to get to a physical prototype, right? It's the same thing for 3D. You're creating a digital double. So I always remark the fact that you have this army of people that's creating physical products, but then you have a small little team that's trying to do the same thing for a digital version.
Fully
And
digitally,
so
yeah.
that's another thing. And even tracking data dimensions and like, you've got to provide good data, good dimensions for a modeler to model something accurately. And so that's another thing, looking at your own readiness as a retailer or any kind of customer who's going to do CGI. How good are my source materials? Do I have good reference information, good reference photos from every angle? Do I have good dimensions? Do I have shots of the bottoms of things. So if that's
Right. And
important to
a lot of
you,
time it's pre-production work too, right? Like you're
absolutely.
building it and
Yeah.
manufacturing it in parallel to trying to put together the resources to market it. And
Yeah.
those efforts are often, split and compartmentalized. But I
Yeah.
certainly see a future where this 3D process can be kind of pushed upstream to the product design as well.
Yes.
And historically, furniture and, home goods are not drawn in CAD unless it's kind of like, office
Yeah.
furniture that's manufactured or, IKEA is maybe one of the exceptions, but
Right.
for the most part, the fabrication process doesn't typically, rely on a engineering CAD process.
Exactly.
And so I
And
think
it's
that's how
directional. Yeah.
yeah.
A product designer will start with a sketch, and I see a lot of companies also using AI to do concept and things like that, and the process of actually getting to a spec where someone can build it, you're never actually keeping a final version of anything till the end. So the drawback is that as a CGI department, you have to wait until that product is like, with a like film is like in the can, right?
It's like a
It's
log. Yeah,
actually
yeah. Yep.
on film until, and so that really cuts your modeling time down. And so trying to figure, that's a wicked problem, trying to figure out how do we get, can we iterate, or is it just, you just got to have an army of people ready to go at the very end where you can like crank out models. And um, so that's a challenge. And then you also have the fact that like the cycles for, I guess, newness, where you want to introduce new product, and um, that's getting even smaller and smaller. So as companies try to react competitively to the product set, oh, we need to have
Yeah.
that product's pretty
It's
hot,
no
so we
longer a
need something
yearly
like
or
that.
by
No,
annual release
like how
cycle.
fast can,
Yeah.
yeah, how fast can we have this new product? So all of CGI gets squeezed for that. And then you want to market that well, then you're going to pay an arm and a leg to do you know product, lifestyle photography for it. But
Yeah, especially if
planning
the
and saying,
traditional way, shipping waiting till this product's
exactly,
physically manufactured, shipping it, getting it on site, and then getting the imagery. At least CGI does afford you that parallel process, so once the manufacturing is locked in and starts, you can then
right,
at least build out your marketing material. But I do think there's probably a world in the future where that design iteration happens internally in the 3D visualization space that we're kind of used to, and then that
yeah,
as soon as the design gets locked in, you're already done. The modeling's already there. You can spit out the
exactly,
renders and the videos and the AR content and the configurator experiences
yeah,
almost even ahead of, production. So you can maybe take
yeah,
pre-orders or gauge like consumer reaction to different options that maybe don't exist yet, but the most
yeah,
popular ones, maybe they do get to exist.
yeah. I don't know if anyone's doing that, where you've got this sort of like creative 3D modeling kind of walking in step with the product designers and the sourcing and just iterating as you go. Um, I always thought that that would be great. You've got the modelers sitting right next to the product designers, and like, oh, you made a change on that. Okay, I'll just reflect it in this. And like, okay, you're not going to have that done for a while. That's fine. We'll just put it on the shelf. But like, it's ready to go. So again, that's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of working very and thinking very differently. But it's, people do it in different industries. It's just trying to get a legacy retailer who's used to building furniture a certain way with manufacturers, and they don't use CAD at all. Trying to get them to adopt a new way of thinking is, it's a challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that in this industry in particular, that the adoption of the newer technology is often met with resistance. But I would say that specifically for spatially considered purchases, like like a couch or a hot tub or something that have to figure out, is this thing going to look good and it's going to
Yeah,
fit. The AR technology was actually pretty well received and adopted earlier than most. Right, we're starting to see adoption of virtual try-on these days, sunglasses and
yeah,
watches and jewelry, but that's kind of to me the second wave. The first wave was really the furniture space, and
mm, mm,
kind of gave me that opportunity within Wayfair to pursue that technology because there was a meaningful value to the end user.
yeah,
So there's occasions and history that this industry can adopt a new technology when
right.
it's meaningful enough to the customer.
Now, I have a question for you, Mike,
Yeah.
because AR adoption and use of AR, in an e-commerce context, it's kind of been like historically kind of low in terms of like
It's
engagement,
definitely fallen
and you're not
flat,
like
though.
saying
The only
90%.
exception has been yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
How do you explain that? And everyone has a mobile device now. And why don't we see that more? Is it that is it not publicized enough? Is it not like people still don't know how to like
I think there's
what's your thoughts?
yeah. It's a combination of factors, and one of the challenges at Wayfair, in particular, when we were launching this through our mobile app, was that, we've had millions of products, and the number of 3D models that we had was, tens of thousands. So it was a lot from a just pure 3D model perspective, but from a percent of catalog perspective, where we're running like, 1% or less, it makes it harder to, make that experience consistent across all your product categories. So although we prototyped with different ways to shop natively in 3D or in AR, like an AR first kind of experience,
Mm,
ultimately it always kind of got relegated down to, below the fold. You're on the product
sure.
page and you're exploring the product, and there's a new little button that says like view in your room.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that would click on that was, relatively small, and partially because they didn't know what it meant. And so we experiment with different messaging. One, I'd call it a misstep that I think we made at the Wayfair app was that we tried to enable it for all products. Like, well, we know we don't have
Mm.
3D models for all products, but we'll put the button there anyway. And
Oh,
if you click that button, you're going to get basically the silhouette with the white background removed as like a little sticker on your
transparent
camera.
PNG. We did that too.
Yeah, and I felt like that was like a step backwards that would maybe prevent people from clicking that button
Yeah.
ever again, because like they see it, they try it, and they're like, well, that's kind of useless. And if they actually got the
Yeah.
3D experience, they'd be answering questions about how it looks and how it fits and the different angles. But when you get that 2D sticker right off the bat, it's not really that encouraging to want to use it again. So I think
Yeah.
part of the adoption challenge was how do you market the feature in a way that is only for a limited selection of
Yeah.
everything you offer. And then I think from the user perspective too, you see more of this on Amazon now. More and more regular products have a 3D spinner or a 3D, like,
Mhm.
put it in your space. But a
Yeah.
lot of times you don't really need to consider what it looks like in space, right? If you're ordering like, some batteries or paper towels, like you don't need to
Right.
see a 3D model of that. But when you are making that larger considered purchase and it's, like a $10,000
Mm.
hot tub, you do want to see where it is. So I think there's certain
Mhm.
product categories that consumers are more excited and willing and interested in using, like a augmented reality experience
Yeah.
versus just any old product. So I think
Right.
there's kind of a combination of factors there that, people may still not really know it exists, or if they've tried it, it's been for a product or an experience that really didn't help them
Yeah.
make a better purchasing decision.
Yeah.
But I often run into a lot of people that have, positive experiences using tools specifically around, those bigger purchases and furniture in particular.
Mm.
And they said, oh, yeah, that's really cool. Like, oh, it's amazing you guys have been doing that for so long. I didn't realize it was around for like 10 years. So I think it's still
Exactly.
new in people's minds these days.
Yeah. I mean, I think we launched our first iPad app. It was it was a room planner. Had about 3,000 products in it. And it was like sort of like poor man's photogrammetry, where you would take a picture of your room and you would map out the ceiling and the walls, and it kind of moved like this, right? But then you
Oh,
drop the
yeah.
furniture in. We actually launched that in 2013, right? So that over a decade ago. But I
Wow.
think the whole idea was that um, what is it good for, right? So you talked about the use case. Is like, is it a validation on a purchase that I already know I'm going to have? Is it for idea generation? And so some of the things with AI now are, if you're just trying to visualize something in your space in a kind of a stylistic, you know sometimes that might be good for AI. So I think we're trying to still figure out, like, what is the use case that this visualization is good for? Like, what part of the customer journey is it good for? And
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
the other thing is, like, how do you present that visualization to the customer? We had a lot of challenges in thinking about, okay, AR web spinners are just like, they're so low quality in a sense that if I put that as a
It
feature
almost
on the
takes away
product
from the
page,
quality of the product in some cases,
yeah, and
right?
like,
And
and
you have
actually,
to balance what you wanna
yeah,
present to the user, have a fast loading experience, but you don't wanna make it look worse
yeah,
or
but I think
unrealistic, right? If it doesn't represent the
yeah,
product well, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
yeah, and it's so for people who don't know, I mean, you have a lot of options. Right now you could, like, okay, well, I could create the rendering, a straight on rendering, which is like going to be very photorealistic. I can have photographic spin, right? So I do basically renders at every angle, and if quality is important to you, or you could have web AR, which is just very quick loading, and maybe it's a validation of scale because you can do dimension lines on things now, and
Or dynamic,
then
right? If it's
yeah,
a configurable product, then those types of
exactly.
interactive experiences can be valuable. And one thing that we're trying to push forward, I should mention that vice chair of the 3D Commerce Group at Kronos, and we've been working on new standards to make models more interesting for the future. One of them is an interactivity extension, so that you can start interacting with those products and
Oh
maybe open
yeah,
and close, different
yes,
doors, or see different features unfold the sofa bed and see how it comes out. So it's not necessarily going to be limited to just a static model where
yeah,
most of the content is today. And so maybe that additional functionality also drives people to those experiences because now they can start seeing different,
yeah,
views and interacting, maybe customizing or adding their own monogram to some stitching that could be
right,
customized or different color
yeah,
options. So I think that dynamic nature is a good compelling
and
reason to use 3D
yeah.
eventually.
And having a roadmap too, because if you don't ever have to touch an asset twice. So like say you're doing a recliner or an opening, like a storage ottoman that opens up, you want it to know that you modeled it in such a way that the inside is actually nice, or
Yeah,
the components are
exactly.
rigged. So there's a certain way you model that's going to be necessary. So you kind of have to look and think, oh yeah, what could we use these for in the future? So when we model it, let's do it the right way.
Absolutely. And that's probably,
Yeah.
we're getting close on time. So I think that's a good kind of closing topic or message to hit on is, where do you see this going? Like, what's the future look like, in 5 to 10 years for product visualization?
Yeah, I think ultimately we're looking at folks trying to save costs and uh, continue to provide inspiration for people in terms of a photographic replacement and just getting those workflows faster, getting the ability to create networks of people who can do that for you reliably. So you don't have to necessarily do an in-house 30, 40 person team. Like how do we create standards for generating that kind of lifestyle? Right now it's really costly, right? So it's still, there's a lot of expense there. It's not always cheaper necessarily than photography, but in some cases I think the other thing is just finding tools that make your workflow easier, right? So um, again, I think there's a definite need in the market for a few things. One is again a trustworthy partner that you can use to QA models. How do I
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
I'm doing a
Yeah.
thousand
You
models,
gotta
how do I get
ensure
through
that
it
they're looking
quickly?
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also just how do I get really good scans of materials? How do I make sure that my materials are future proof, my models are future proof? And I think those are where partnerships come in place now, and some are better than others. It was challenging as a retailer starting off. It's daunting because you never have a one-stop shop necessarily. You have to find people who are good at and work at it. So I think that companies consolidating, companies like Super DNA, others, 3D Cloud, who are combining a lot of these applications, but also providing those services to get you an organized, almost like ecosystem.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's a need, and I think it's definitely going to be necessary for that companies like that to scale and to provide services that are for someone who's just starting out to someone who's got millions of products, right? So um, yeah, so I think that's where trends are, and then also AI. I think AI is looking for the use case that's kind of foolproof, and interesting to see so many people getting into that and where video is going.
Yeah. It's
Is
totally
it going
like
to
the hot
replace?
topic.
Yeah, is it going to replace CGI? I don't know. Like in terms of
Yeah,
3D,
we do
right now
some
it's
AI.
yeah,
We call it AI CGI on our end,
yeah,
and depending on the use case, it can be really good. And the technology continues to improve, where you can match lighting and shadowing. So you still
yeah,
have photographic quality, because we typically base the AI product on a regular photograph, silhouette photography, let's say, and then you can place it in different contexts and scenes.
yeah.
and you can generate images with a lot more variations and a lot more different backgrounds faster than you would if you needed to model those backgrounds
Yeah.
each time.
Yeah.
But there's also, weird artifacts you see. Like we were doing some
Sure.
outdoor like patio scene, and there was a rug, and then there was grass like growing through the rug because the AI thought, well, it's outdoors, there should be some grass, and it just kind
Right.
of put it in the
Right.
wrong place. And so you got
Yeah.
to watch out for those kind of little gotchas that
Yeah.
AI can invent stuff sometimes that it's not supposed
Yeah.
to.
And I think it's just where people are going to get used to, right? So like, where will 3D glasses come in? Where will wearables, and the whole idea of getting 3D content to be like, that's the natural expectation for the consumer.
Right. Yeah,
And
if
right
the
now we're in,
interface and the
yeah,
UI is all 3D, then, flat 2D
exactly.
photos aren't gonna cut it anymore. People will expect
Exactly.
that whole digital experience.
So it's ours to create. We've got to create demand for 3D content. We've got to like find the good uses, the killer use cases, I would say, that are like, hey, I have to have this. And again,
Yeah.
it's things that you can't do normally. Like yeah, you can't ship me a sample of a whole dining room set so I can see it in my room.
Yep,
Okay.
but
That's
yeah, but
that's
now we
creating
can
a need
digitally,
that is value.
drop it
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. Well, this is a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time and being one of our first guests on the
Thank
podcast.
you, Mike.
Still untitled at this point, but we're hoping to produce more content,
You should
this coming
crowdsource
year.
the title. Say, people, give me some
Yeah,
titles.
like and subscribe and send your title suggestions.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you, Mike.
Awesome.
Appreciate being here.
Well, thank you all for watching. See you next time.